Individualism. I said to talk about this morning in my Welcome to Country about Indigenous people that were so in community that they didn't have a policy manual, they just were in it, and it was taken for granted, and the individuality flowered through that, okay? And when I went to the kibbutz, it was amazing, and kibbutz is a system where it was very communal. And it was amazing how powerful the individuals were in the community context. But in our Western consciousness, we tend to think we have to sacrifice our individuality for the sake of the collective. And that's not true. But we've got the triviality is us learning that, because we're now in a situation where our individualism has become toxic and is only really supports capitalism, but it doesn't support us. The idea of the autonomous individual is a myth. We have to invest in our vulnerability whether we like it or not, because we're interdependent, we're social beings and so forth. So the difficulty we have is it's become extreme, and therefore the way back into tribe is way down the track. And yet, on the other hand, we've got that on the one hand, extreme individualism. On the other hand, we've got the future bearing down on us. A future of requiring much more investment in the locality, where we live, who we live with, as an antidote to excessive dependence on so many people who don't matter about one particular thing. And we talk about economy. It's not very economical to have a relationship which is just about one function for a moment, as distinct from having a relationship with a person which has multi-functions, multi-dimensions to it. Then that relationship is worth taking care of. It's worth being accountable to, all right? But if you're just buying something in the supermarket, who cares? You know, we'll be polite. Yeah, oh, hi, how are you today? You know, I'm fine. Next question, nothing, that's it. So, and then we've got that amplified by this technological dependence, which is even more impersonal and more, it's global. And that's one thing First Peoples never had. We have a global consciousness, we carry a global consciousness, and given our power to reshape the earth, it's great that we have that. Nevertheless, these people are always late. Very good, very good. Guess what, they're from Mura. Anyway, before I was rudely interrupted, I was talking about global consciousness. What was I talking about? Global consciousness? Technology, our dependence on, oh yeah. And then of course next is going to be AI. We're going to have our intimate friend's going to be our little AI robot. It's just how far we've gone. And we've got 6 million dogs as a substitute. We've got 35% of the population lives alone. So we have a radically structural problem in terms of our humanity. What's it mean to be human going forward, on the one hand, and the threat of radical disruption on the other, as the society collapses. I thought you might say that. As the society gets more and more disturbed, more and more less reliable, where investing in the state to save us is excessive. I'm not suggesting for one moment that we invest all our eggs in our local community, but we need to come back from the extreme where the neighbourhood doesn't matter, your neighbours don't matter, your local community doesn't. You're not connected, except with this thing, the phone. So Mura, I'll talk about Mura, and then we'll have a more radical option here, which is great, and that's part of why we're together, because I'm talking about one end of the continuum in a sense. Mura was a conservative step away from the city, right? Creating a community. And we've got a community centre, a bit like a body corporate. At least we own the land in common, and that's been a battle to hang on to that. at least we have no dogs and cats. Well, one now. There's always someone barking at the door to change something that's fundamental to the well-being of the community. Excuse the pun. So we have 6 clusters, hamlets, 3 clusters that side, 3 that side of the community. And that built in a structure which minimised the necessity to resolve all conflicts. Because that cluster over there can be falling apart, and this one over here is fine. And we don't have to, as we were talking about this morning, we don't have to resolve every interpersonal conflict. So structuring in ways of resolving and working with conflict, which we talked about this morning, is very important, but also how to structure your community in a way that you don't have conflict, or you minimise it. So you're not overworked and exhausted by, oh, not another bloody mediation we've got to do. Bloody hell. Anyway, yeah. So more and more is a very conservative model. And in the sense that it combines individualism. Everybody has their own house. It's their business whether, how many kids they have, how many cars they drive, where they work or don't work. It's all the big things about their life is basically left to the individual or their family, the nuclear family, right? And then we have some communal, some shared facilities. That's a pretty conservative model. It was pretty easy to market that. But to market something more radical, I didn't consider 50 years ago. It was feasible, not viable, even though it may well be necessary going forward. And I think it is necessary to be much more radical. And I think I'll leave it at that and hand to you. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Can we ask questions, please?
Yeah, after you have to wait your turn.
My turn, apparently.
Yes.
Okay, so I might just say make a distinction about individualism, because you know Maslow's? Anyone not know Maslow? Yeah. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So while you're struggling, you can't, evolve yourself in any way because you're struggling. Maslow stole that from the Blackfoot Indians in Canada. It did not end up, and the peak was not individuation, it was community integration, because that's how they lived. And they knew their interdependence, because if I look out at that tree breathes out and I breathe in, I breathe out, that tree breathes in. That is everything about us. To say that I'm an individual is absolute delusion, because we don't stand up, we are held up by everything. Isn't that right when you think about it? The plankton in the ocean, everything. Everything we've got, we've taken out of the earth, we've stolen it. So this sort of thing that started to happen in the 80s, of this extreme individualism, people who've been born into it, it's very hard to see that you're in it. When you're in something, very hard to see that you're in it. But if you're not in it, it comes across very clearly. And so I think I don't know why people are doing this individualism, but I think because you can, because there's, we can live on our own, we can do everything. You just have to pay money, and you don't need to be dependent on anybody. And that's very much how things have become. But look, I don't know the deeper reason for this move towards individualism. But it's, to me, in relation to the whole that is holding us up, it's a very, first of all, dangerous way to live, shallow way to live, and it's like creating an avatar. I haven't done that, but it's like having an avatar online. It's an identity. And the creation of an identity is a dangerous thing, because it's a fabrication. And it's a false fabrication because it's not who we are. And that's what you find out in community. You start to find out who you are as a human being. And I think, a woman who lived in a community of nuns in Korea, a lovely Zen community, she said they all rub together. So they're nuns in the Buddhist tradition. They're not, they don't have conflict resolution skills, nothing. They're all rubbing together. She said, we're all like potatoes in a sack, and we rub together and the skin rubs off. And when the skin rubs off, then we're able to be vulnerable together. And the more vulnerable you can be together with people, the more connection you have. This doesn't sound logical, but this is how it works. When you peel off all those layers of identity and let yourself get out of the way of yourself so you can be yourself, you get that incredible level of connection, and with connection comes belonging. And they are the two things I think that people long for. Would that be right?
Do you want to talk a bit about your community, the structure of it? What you share?
Well, we share...
How many are you?
Oh, we're not hardly any. Like, it's very small, 18 adults and kids, yeah. But we all work together on Friday mornings, we all work together on Saturday mornings, we eat together. Everything is communal, the pantries, all the food that's available, you can just go and get it. No one's saying, oh, you've got too much. It's because we trust each other. I don't want to repeat a lot that happened. How many people were in the session this morning? Not a lot. Okay, yeah. So I don't want to repeat a lot about that. But when you have got really vulnerable together and you recognise your interdependence, you really recognise it. You really know it, like that tree out there and me and all of us. But it's not a theory. It's a real knowing of the interdependence. Then something different happens. And it doesn't mean, you have all the same stuff going. But there is such a bond. There is a bond, which is a beautiful bond of connection and belonging. So I'll probably stop there because you talk. We did both. You did the overview, and then I did the more nitty gritty. So let's hear from
questions now. We had a question over here because you've forgotten it already, have you?
I've written it down because I knew I'd forget it. Do I need that?
Yeah, you do.
Okay, is that better?
It's for me.
It's for you, all right. It's Glenn's the most important person here. I've heard a little bit about this before, but your idea of clusters, keeping problems in each cluster, and I've experienced it and it works really well. How much of that was designed and how much was just realised?
No, it was designed. It was clear. We tossed up the choice. Do we have one village all around the community centre here, or do we have clusters? And that's what we... and the part of the argument was we were only entitled to a permit for six houses, and initially, 600 acres at one house per 100, and we argued that each cluster would have the environmental footprint of one normal house. Bullshit as it was, but that was part of the argument in order to get a permit too. But it was mainly we didn't want conflict, a microcosm of conflict to infect the whole village. So that's the risk, and everybody gets all messed up and stirred up about what's happening in your cluster, for example. And so that was a way of protecting a bit against that, and to provide built-in resilience so that community couldn't be destroyed by a particular division. So in other words, two clusters could be dysfunctional, two could be okay, and two good. I mean, it's not that good at the moment, but it does fluctuate. So it was quite explicit, deliberate, and wise at the time. But is it wise for the future? I don't think so.
Okay.
Because I think we need to circle the wagons, we need to communalise, we need to do exactly what Carol said, is to come together more, so we've got more of our life invested where we live and who we live with. So we're less dependent on the state, on the corporate world, on the virtual world. That's what I think. And why I do that? Why I do that is because, for example, the economic footprint is radically reduced when you live more locally. Your environmental footprint is reduced. So it's economically and ecologically makes sense, but it's also fundamentally, more importantly, is fundamental to our well-being as a human being. And it's development and flowering. What are we here for? We're here to manifest our full potential as much as possible. And how do we do that? Well, we don't do it by sitting in front of the telly. Yep.
My question would be then, how would you navigate the conflicts that might arise and prevent them from disrupting the entire community if you're not going to separate them into clusters?
Well, that's why we talked this morning about the various mechanisms you can use to work with conflict. And two, we talked also this morning about conflict's not necessarily destructive, it's creative and innovative, provided you have the tools to work with it.
And
Carol.
one of the things I talked about this morning is it takes two to make a conflict. You don't have to go and find out in that very, what's the word that I like to use? Anyway.
Nobody else here likes to use it. Can you help?
A not good way of getting into it, sticking your nose in because you want, like clickbait sort of. You don't have... Yeah. I can't think of the word. But you don't have to stick your nose into those conflicts. And the fewer people who stick their nose in, it doesn't spread. This is something called agency. You have agency. How does conflict spread? By gossip. It's a simple equation. People love gossip because it's drama. And if you know something that someone else doesn't know, it's identity. It's all these phony things, druggy things. So there's lots of things you can do that have nothing to do with what's written in the corporate stuff to stop conflict spreading. Don't spread it. The people that are in it need to know about it, but no one else needs to know about it unless it's involving you.
But also...
It's a dead silence. Just let's hear this silence.
We're listening intently.
No, but are you taking that in? Something... Yeah, that's what I thought. That, to me, is radical. We talked about getting more radical. That's radical. That is getting more radical. We can do lots of structural radicals, but this is internal radical, empowerment radical, which is what everyone's going to need for when whatever happens or is happening, continues to happen. Because, go on.
Sorry, no, but the difficulty, of course, we've got, given the extreme individualism, is to actually know that I need that journey. I need that journey into the depth of being with others and all that means in terms of my vulnerability, my strengths, my weaknesses and so forth. And that's the problem we're up against, I think, is we're just still hanging on to our individualism and tacking community on. Look at the structures of most of the communities around. They're basically body corporates and...
Identity, I think it's... I know I put individualism and it came off my whatever I sent here, but now as we talk about it, would identity be a better word? Like creating these identities and that have to be satisfied.
What I like about individualism is it's structural as well as in your consciousness.
And it's in the core.
Identity tends to be just how you view yourself.
And it's at the top of Maslow's, the Western version of Maslow.
Yeah. Okay, more questions? Let's just...
This is Carol. I wanted to ask you, there was a time when you were an individual, and this morning you said, everything is hard and that you chose community hard.
Yes.
So, and I love that. I wrote that down. And I'm wondering, when you were the individual and you saw that that was hard, and then you knew that community was hard, why did you choose community hard?
Because I was just a square peg in a round hole. I was brought up in a conservative edifice, and my trajectory was to deadly boring, or to uncertainty and risk. And I have lived a lot on uncertainty and risk, and that's a large part of it. But there's no way I could have done that trajectory to, you know, well, everyone knows what, you know what I'm talking about? No. Oh, well, the nuclear family, the big high fence, the endless trying to survive on, you know, diminishing everything because that's what's happening. Yeah, just limited, very limited. To me, it felt incredibly limited, and I just couldn't do it. I couldn't be the role in that scenario. I could not do the role that I would have had to do. And so I was pretty desperate because it was, well, this was happening in, in the early 60s, that's right. Mid-60s, I suppose, when I was adolescent. And there was no internet. How was I going to get out? Like, what was the way out? So I dated some graziers. I thought, oh, I can go to the Western District and have a wool shed and all these people. And I was going to have a community in a wool shed and all these blokes shearing and cooking. I thought, this is how I'll have a community. Anyway, I realised that I didn't really connect terribly well with the graziers, so that wasn't going to work. So how was I going to get out? Then someone came along who said, we can get a house and I can give you a house and a swimming pool, or we can start a community. I thought, whoa, you're the one. So off we went and looked for land and started the community. So yeah, it was aversion to the norm. It was, and the mainstream. I had extreme aversion to the norm and the mainstream at the time. Well, I still have, but yeah, that's how it. You see how organic and weird that is. Like that whole story is like you don't know. You know, it's like it's when I haven't never climbed rock faces, but you know, people who climb up those rock faces. What they say is that you never know where the next hold on is. You're feeling around. That's how it felt. That's a good metaphor for it. And I think for everything, when you don't feel like you fit with what's going on and you're looking for the next hold, and then because you're looking for it, because you have some intention to do something different, then it starts to show up. It starts to become, sort of form up in your existence, yeah.
Can I just ask one more extension to that?
Yes.
The extension is, given that both are hard...
Yes, the hard.
Yeah,
that's right.
Given that both are hard, then with your marketing hat on, when people come and look at our communities and that, and they see... They're coming because their life maybe is a bit hard,
yes.
And then they see hard.
Yeah.
How can we, market our type of hardness?
Right.
Because that's what we want to do.
That's right. I wouldn't have, at the time I didn't know it was going to be, I just thought what I was in was hard. And then when we were well into the community and people came along and talked about, utopia and all that rubbish, and I said, no, it's just a different type of hard. But I'm not trying to hide that because we run a farm and we don't want people coming under the illusion. And I think that goes back to Peter's raising the issue of pulling the weight. We only want people who pull their weight because we run a farm, and it is it is not an income sharing farm. There are Common Ground once upon a time was income sharing. There's quite a few in the US that actually income share. What I realised when I start talking to people about it is that we outgo share. So if you don't pull your weight, like I grow the carrots for everyone. If there are no carrots, then we're having to buy them. So every bit of stuff we produce reduces the amount of outgo, and it's enormously cheap to live there, and you're living on organic food. So if someone comes who doesn't pull their weight, it's a very short loop to, the moment of putting in the carrots to the moment of being there's none of what is it? It's a short accountability loop. It's so obvious. And that's what you have on a food producing place. The accountability is incredibly obvious. So if I failed, not because of the weather or other outside things, because of my not doing it well, I would lose the crop. You lose the crop. It's just like an Indigenous village. They do very big shaming. A lot of them do very big shaming to get people to, get up to where they need to be.
They don't pussyfoot around.
No, they don't. We don't pussyfoot around. So I wouldn't. People come and say, "Oh, this is paradise," and I say, "No, it's hard work, and creating it is hard work. And if you want to do that, you're welcome. But don't come here if you don't want to do it."
I think the hard work. Can I say something?
So we're not marketing, but I see the difference here, or maybe where you are. Yeah. Go on.
Well, I think the question of hard soft. If we keep on going the way we are, what's going to happen to our suicide rate? What's happening to our sense of meaning? And the question of meaning making, when you're an isolated individual, is pretty hard. The beauty of living in a community is it's easier to engage with the question of meaning, in terms of your meaning, in terms of who you are, how you are. I said, I think about 5 years ago, before I got cancer, I said, I'm done. I'm who I am. It's done. You don't like it? Tough shit. This is who I am. End of story. I'm not going to do it. And then I get cancer. Oh, kick up the arse. Got to do some growing. Still got to do some changing. And that's been great as a teacher. It's one opportunity as a teacher. But I think the community is always working to teach you if they care about you. And the other side of it, if you're going down the rabbit hole of suicide, mental illness, and why is that all exploding? It's because, Durkheim studied this years ago, is that people, for example, who are in a part of a religious order have much lower mental illness than people who aren't. That was 19th century stuff. And that was the beginning of the discipline of sociology, because it's just basic humanity, that we need to live in community, and if it's hard, or it's soft, or it's wonderful, and all that repertoire which it is what you need to do if you want to look after your meaning in life. What's the point of existing otherwise? And a lot of people are deciding, no, I don't want to. Enough.
Oh, I see. Yeah. I think I'm a bit afraid, because I made that comment about it's hard, that all the joy I get out of living there and everything about it, and the land that I live on that we're looking after, and that I go into I just want to do the soft side of it, because I have overdone the hard side of it. I realise it. I walk into the kitchen and all the herb jars are full. I know who's grown them, who's dried them, who's twiddled them off. You go into the pantry, you know who's grown everything, where it comes from, how hard it is to grow it. You go into the cheese room, all those cheeses made and, looked after and turned and pressed and all the rest of it. You look at the pastures, how beautifully clean they are of weeds and how they're slashed. And there is a sort of, there's a rhythm that we have because we have, people have a set lot of jobs like all these little pieces of it, a jigsaw puzzle, and everyone does their bit. And no one has to tell anyone to do their bit because they do it. And there's this, you can do something. We were having an event quite a while ago, and suddenly someone from outside had invited a whole lot more people. And I thought, oh, well, it won't be much at morning tea, but I didn't worry about it. And just people just saw more people, more food, just came. And as this really organicity starts to happen, organicity, it's incredible to be in it. Does that make sense, that word, when I say that? Just flexible flow. We had that at the Bentley blockade because everyone did their job, and the whole thing, a whole village, 200 people plus lots of people with many different issues going on, ran that camp for 6 weeks. Flexible flow. No one bossing anyone around. People just doing what they said they would do. It's an incredible space to be in. And after the flood, when Lismore was trashed, there's this massive flexible flow going on. And you'd go in the Trees Not Bombs cafe tent of Susie from the mid-north coast, I think. Susie Russell. This whole cafe run totally flexible. Well, you knew she was in the background making sure a lot of things were happening, but people came and they just looked what was happening and just got in there and helped. That is the step into communitarian, is when that starts to happen, but you need people to step into it first as well, because it can't come out of nowhere. It has to come out of people de-individuating and moving into that mode, and what flex flow that comes from, that model, what's it come from? Spiral dynamics. Do you know spiral dynamics? Yes. Whoa, it's very beautiful.
But it's interesting to comment that that flexible flow comes out of a crisis, the flood, and that's the point about whether I think the crisis is going to drive the transformation much more. The damage, seeing people suffer, that's going to drive us to move away from individualism. Just like when we had that COVID thing, suddenly, I want to get the regions matter. Oh my God, the cities really. I don't know whether the city's any good anymore. I might want to get the hell out of here. And then, of course, when it's over, they all go back, or most do. The point I'm making is, listening to us is not going to have much effect, but the climate catastrophe that's coming, for those who are with it and smart enough to preempt it, is and if you read the science, there's no question about it. No one's bloody arguing even about the science anymore. They're just putting off doing anything about it.
I've got a question. Yeah, it's really about kind of the practical, finding that balance between sort of individual and community. Because when we first moved to Peace Farm, which is where I live down the hill, it's an even smaller community than Dharmananda. Right. We had, the idealistic of wanting to have communal dinners every night.
Oh, right.
But I had 4 kids, and then the other 2 families had 1 kid and 2 kids each. Yeah. And then when you bring all those kids together, it was just complete chaos and noisy. And so every night dinners became once a week, and we still do work days and meals once a week. But I guess also there's that thing of the division of labour when there's mums looking after babies and the men are all usually. We had a very gendered division of labour at the start, which I really struggled with because it was usually all the women doing the cooking and looking after the kids, and the men were out on the farm, toiling the soil. And that changed as the babies grew older, and we started to take the kids out on the farm and stuff like that. But it just, I guess my question is just finding how you involve everybody And at Dharmananda especially, like if you're eating every meal together, is
No, not
everybody-
every.
No, and
No, 2 or 3 nights a week.
okay.
And
is
it varies
do you cook
depending-
together and things like
No,
that.
we've got a board and you just sign up for these 4 basic jobs, milking, etc., blah, blah. And so you know there's going to be a cook on a certain night. And it varies. Like one of our members now got dementia. She was cooking every week. So we've lost a cook. And yeah, it varies. Cooks go up and down, but we don't worry because that's how life is. It goes up and down. Families come, yes, they've got kids. That's fine, they want to eat at home. You know, we don't make it a problem. That is not individualism.
So there's
A
flexibility with it.
communitarian is that you support people to survive 4 kids. My God, you know, that's what you're doing. You're helping people, each other. So if we say, oh, you know, they're getting so uncommunitarian. No, because they're down when the kids are at school, they're in the garden really pulling their weight and doing good things.
I feel like bringing up kids in a community, and probably I'm sure the people at
Yeah.
Moomba and everybody would say that it's so much easier and so much more
Yes.
supportive.
And so much better for the kids.
Yeah.
That's right. Did that answer it? Yes, that sort of.
Yeah, I think so. Just,
But it's a
finding that
way-
balance. I guess every community has to find it themselves.
But it's not
as to what
like
works.
it's the people in the community that let go of bean counting. Bean counting does you in.
Yeah.
Oh, I did this and
Yeah.
If the people let go of it, and it takes a long time to let go of it because we're very trained into it, everything's counted, and you've got to start letting go of that, and then you get flexible flow. Because I couldn't have just ignored the fact that, because I was quite central in this little ritual we were doing, and if I had been bean counting, oh, I've done all this and who's going to do the food and it's all up to me. One of the things that does people in is the belief that it's all up to you. Because then it looks like everyone's ripping you off. It's an internal conditioned belief that comes from, you know, parental abandonment largely, where the child decides, not consciously, but that's how they end up with this belief. It's all up to me, because it is. And then you grow up with it, and then it does you in, because you look through that lens and it looks like you're being ripped off. It's really worthwhile. Does that make sense?
Oh, it does. Yeah.
You have to do this sort of work, stop the bean counting, anyway, blah.
Yeah.
And then the flexible flow starts to happen because the individuals, the people are flowing.
Yeah.
They're flowing internally, so the flowing gets externalized. But it's a group thing, but if you've got people who are, you know, checking how much you take out of the pantry, oh my God, no. Yeah.
Question.
Yes.
How do you move beyond that? You know, if you're in a community.
Bean counting.
Yeah.
Well, you have to talk about it to start with, really raise it, and if you want to change anything in the community, you've got to start talking about it. And then you've got to talk about how it shows itself up in the community, examples of it. People have got to start fessing up about what they're doing. You just have a good talk. And then people can decide where they want on it. And we're having a talk about now, one of the things is people being afraid to speak up. I want to get rid of that fear, but it's hard. But I can read, I'm starting to see the systems that happen that keep it in place. So we're uncovering the systems. Oh, it just happened then. We're in a meeting. Right, that's how it happens. And we're collecting a list of it, how we do it. You're self-analysing, and it's very interesting if you're into looking at how systems happen between people. I'm very interested in that because I did anyone here who's doing marriage therapy, anyway, you have to see the systems. And when you show up the systems, the people can choose to step out of them. So you show up the systems, and then people can choose to stop doing them because they're invisible. Those things are invisible.
Can we have some more questions? We've got quite a few questions. We need to make shorter answers if we can.
Yeah, sorry.
Shorter answers, and so we get a more variety of input.
Well, just shut me up, that's all.
I will.
Speak up.
No, your answers often address a couple of issues, so don't worry about that, Carol.
Okay.
Mine's a little bit related to what we're talking about right now, and it's around, I'm part of a forming community in the Sunshine Coast. I'm Trudy. And it's around this question of sweat equity,
Yes.
which we're still trying to get our heads around.
Yes.
And everyone is stepping forward and doing work according to what they're passionate about and what their
Yes.
skills are. But there are people in the group that have skills in building, for
Yes.
example. And this question of, if I build a structure on the land, I would need to get some kind of compensation or a discount in my share. So it's bringing up a whole lot of debate. And I'm
Okay.
just curious, your thoughts or if you've had to deal with this in the past in forming the community.
Sweat equity's always been, well, not hugely. We're a farm that produces food, and the evidence of your effort is either there or not there. It's not complicated formula. So I don't understand. So this is a member, they've bought a membership and they want to build their house.
Or build a community structure.
Oh, I see. And that's their
Yeah.
contribution. Okay, build a community.
Contribution, and it's like measuring. And
They want
you
to.
want to keep a track of
Yeah,
it in
yeah.
a spreadsheet, and it's like, it's overcomplicated, but everybody contributes in a different way, with a different skill.
That's
and some
right.
skills it's very tangible when you
Well,
can
that's
see what happens.
that's high level bean counting.
Yeah.
I don't know what you do if they're already a member. Don't get them to build a community house. It's just complicated. So just keep building your own stuff and maybe build a chuka, but not a big thing because then they're going to be bean counting forever, and that will be used against everyone. You can see how we do ourselves in, and when you see it you see the beginnings of it, you can do an intervention and stop it.
Something else we talked about briefly this morning was equity of contribution, and I'm wondering how you balance sort of keeping track of some equitability and contribution with trying to minimise bean counting.
It's a good question.
It is. Will I have a crack?
Yeah.
Will I have a crack at that one?
You.
Yeah, me, yeah. I think the bigger the community, the more the necessity for bean counting. I think also, it might take us it might take us a long time to build a culture that doesn't require that degree of documentation. I mean, our treasurer's here, sort of scratching her chin here. So I think that's building the culture where the group culture is one thing, and the other is about knowing each other. If we really get to know each other, we know whether your spirit of wanting to make a contribution is alive or you're just doing it because you should. So I think this, and you were talking about the two different types of people, and I think that's right, is that equity matters, but it shouldn't be an oppressive, you only did 2 hours today, and the expectation is you do 5 hours a day or whatever. That kills the community. It's not just about the effect on the individual who's being called up before the court. It's the effect on the spirit of the community if we get too obsessed about worrying about about this and that individuals. I'm not interested in that sort of degree of accountability. And accountability takes time. It manifests through time. And people's lives and circumstances change and fluctuate, and we've got to allow for all that, to allow for have the flow, for sure. At the same time, as I said this morning, there needs to be limits to tolerance. I mean, Hitler rose to power because they tolerated him for too long. And we're in the same sort of thing in America right now. Yeah, well, exactly. And so it's not oppressive to have limits to tolerance if you've got a pretty tolerant framework within which diversity is honoured and recognised and allows for each individual's particular circumstance and so forth. But sooner or later, you know, there has to be no. Enough's enough. And I mean, she's tougher than I am.
We're tough.
Yeah, I know. She's tougher than me.
We're tough.
Carol's tough.
Oh, I'm tough.
So, you know, that's...
But what's that wonderful American philosopher, ancient, who just died? I years ago read, he said it's about complementarity. And you have to take account of age and capability. And now I've gone from a huge input, like way outside of, you know, because we didn't bean count. People just put in so much into the community, all of us. And now I can't. And you know, that's accepted because they're now the younger people are doing it. And one of them said to me, she said, "Oh, you shouldn't be doing that, Kate." You know, I still do things that I can do. She said, you shouldn't be doing that at 80, you know. And so there's that caring, like there's that village sort of thing that is beyond bean counting. It's about complementarity. And I think that's a very, you know, useful, when you're trying to soften your mind down from this whole economic, what's the word? Rationalism that is been pushed into us. It takes a lot. It takes a lot to let go of that. The infection of that.
Thank you. My name's Bernadette. I think my question is almost a little bit more philosophical, going back to that difference between individuality and communalism or communitarianism, of people's willingness to to sacrifice something. And I think there's a lot in this bean counting discussion. But in my mind, I really see one barrier towards people really involved in a highly communal community, not willing to sacrifice, whether it be their time, their money, their energy, or their autonomy. Like an example that I mean is, say if a community member was quite frail or became ill, and people just willingly sacrificing time and energy to care for that person, or to willingly sacrifice a portion of your income to go towards the community's projects and developments. I'm interested in your thoughts on how willing people are to make sacrifices. Is that a good thing? Is that a necessary thing?
While we're hanging on to our individualism, it's pretty hard to see the benefits of the sacrifice. So, for example, if you're sacrificing for the sake of the community and so forth, giving up some of your autonomous power and so forth, why do that is because of the benefits that hopefully come from that, such as you're sharing co-responsibility for your life, that my life and your life becomes interdependent, and whether we thrive or not we commit to thriving together is a very big different thing from I'm committed to me thriving. So therefore, you're looking through the lens of individualism. It's all going to be sacrifice, me giving up my autonomy, my ability to make decisions about this and this and that. I've got to now consult the community and so forth. Then, okay, you've got to look at the other side of the ledger. Otherwise, you're not going to do it.
No, and the problem is the word sacrifice in itself. That is highly economic, rational, individual. It is not a sacrifice. All of us have given, we call it generosity. I mean, we don't even name it because it's normal. Everyone, we're trying to build this building for the older people, you know, who can't live in the ridiculous houses we built all those years ago when we thought we weren't going to get old. We're building this place, and the building materials are not, you know, everything's so expensive now. And we'd have a meeting, and how are we going to pay for it? Oh, I'll put in this much. They're not even probably going to even live in it. I'll put in this much. And then the guy that does the most on the farm for the year, all the years, I think someone raised the issue of someone who does an enormous amount. He says, oh, we say, thank you, Lee, or thank you, Lee. He says, I'd do anything for Dharmananda. He even made like a joke, we just play around with it. And he made a T-shirt of that, I'll do anything for Dharmananda, on it. Like, it's just ridiculous. It's a game, it's a fun, we're giving. You never know what's going to happen to you. And you're backing up your life against something that you think's going to happen when this is going to happen. You have to, that's how we're doing it. And you can't write that down in a document. It is something you create by these little steps. Let's stop being cunning, let's be generous. Yeah.
Question from Phil. Okay. No, I don't think so. I fully support the analysis of the cult of the individual being basically to support capitalism, and for human survival or thrivability we need community. My question, I guess, is your notion, Peter, of circling the wagons, that we need to sort of cluster and get together, is how do we do that while not actually creating excessive polarisation of that? Like, the divisiveness that's happening, the us and them that's happening in our culture is, I think, a major component of, the destructive direction we're heading. But sort of tribalism and, getting together really strongly has value, but it must happen at the same time as being open to a sort of universal value. I just guess interested in your take.
Yeah, I agree with you, Phil. As I said before, globalism is part of the new reality we take into the village. Yeah. And that helps us to be accepting of difference. Actually, I think it helps difference, because we're not just feeling like our world, tribal world, is all there is, all that matters, and anybody else is foreign. Yeah. So I don't think they're mutually exclusive. Yeah. And whether we like it or not, we're locked into holding both those worlds. And how we've created our community relate to and contribute to the world. And I think it's very important in terms of maintaining and developing community culture and boundaries, is to be of service to a larger world than you just yourselves. So circle the wagons to protect yourself and defend against the invasions that are coming, and that can be the technology as much as anything, or it can be a mob down the valley. So I think I still stick by that, but I actually think we're always, whether we like it or not, we're now a tribe. We can only be a tribe as part of the planet, and that's great. I think that's good.
And we've got to keep that conscious.
Oh, we've got to work with it all the time. What's the dialectic between it? So what's happening with the future? Yeah. What's the Earth now going to do? Yeah. What's Gaia going to do to us that we're going to have to respond? How are we going to have a partnership with the rest of nature and all that in order to survive? So it's not about being a nice soft greenie. It's really much more about our survival and thriving, how we can do that. And what we're doing in our culture now is just not working. When we just blame the individual, if you're a failure, if you're suicidal or you're depressed or whatever, it's your fault. You're responsible for that, not the society. Well, bullshit. Over here.
I just wanted to touch on a point based on what you just said, and also what I don't remember your name, but about that builder. It's about community development. When people get suicidal, don't have a purpose in life, many are getting into communities and they want to learn a skill, maybe, or as a community, maybe everybody wants to get on board with the builder who's highly skilled in mastering his craft, and maybe teach, you know, others to get on board and build together as a community the infrastructures on their land, you know, so then everybody's contributing somehow to this to happen, you know, and then maybe reduce suicide as well in the meantime, like, you know, mental health and isolation and lack of, like, I don't know, sense of worth or something like that. That's like a community building and development. That, for me, it is. I just wanted to put it out there. And I wanted to ask Carol, how long have you lived in communities? Like,
Well, we bought it in 72, went away to pay it, get the money overseas to earn the money to pay it off. And then probably in 1975, people started coming. So I've lived there since 1975. Yeah. And I got a graveyard there, so I'm going to be in that graveyard one day, just down below my house, and yeah. So I'm not, unless the Lord smotes me in some really weird way, I'm hoping that I will be in that graveyard on the farm. Yep. Yep. But I agree about the getting on with sharing skills. We are building now, and it attracts people because they want to learn. And it used to happen very much in decades ago when communities would all come and help each other build. But it's a very strong attractor, the building of a building, because people really want to learn. So it's a lovely comment you made. Yeah.
I've got a question more about like the micro individual, and that kind of ties into what you're talking about, needing to talk about stuff and listen about stuff. And that is like when you're really trying to listen to somebody who's got a radically different opinion than yours, it almost feels like a threat to your individuality to actually listen. It's kind of like you have to let go of your identity in order to be fully open to really listening. Can you talk about that?
I just recently did for my women's group a deep listening workshop just about that, where how can we get our body in a state, because in a very receptive state. I will do one of those exercises tomorrow. It's called sitting like a mountain, or you could say strong back, open front. But it gets you into this physicality you need to be able to receive tough opinions, because, yeah, that's right, we feel personally offended if we're not agreed with. Yeah. Isn't that interesting? That it's a personal offence that someone doesn't agree with you. That's so there's lots of very, these undermining things that we have to be worked on.
I think it's how you disagree.
Sorry?
I think it's how you disagree.
Oh, yes.
You know
Yes,
what I
so
mean?
that's right.
Okay.
Of course, you're going to disagree, but you have to have a way of doing it. So I've forgotten your question. Have I answered it? Yeah. I have. Oh, that's handy. Oh, yeah.
Can either of you two lovely humans speak to something that you had an idea at the start of your communities that you thought was going to be really good and really powerful, and then you've scrapped because it doesn't work? Because sometimes we learn from our mistakes. I'm hearing a lot of good stuff that has worked, but what hasn't worked that you can speak to?
You're looking at me, all right. Well, I think it's a good question, and I mean, being a co-founder and having, visiting 50 different communities and writing my PhD on the topic, and in a sense, and why did I do that? In a sense, was because I was sick of protesting against the Vietnam War and so forth. I wanted to do a constructive thing. So Instead of asking government to do the change, what am I going to do? So that was my question. And it's inevitable that I'm somewhat disappointed because I'm always confronted with, how more and more it could be better. You know, well, we haven't dealt. How are we going to do next? You know, so I got a list like that, and but I'm retiring. I'm not a director anymore. I'm not involved. I'm on the back burner, and looking to the next generation, 50-year-olds, to do the leading. What was the question?
What are the mistakes that
Oh, yeah.
or the things that you thought were really good at the start, but now through history you've gone, no, that's crap?
Well, I think, as I've said already, I think it's now, because of the circumstances we're facing, I think the designer more and more is not fit for purpose. So that's the fundamental, and I think, you know, it's lasted 50 years, and that's pretty good, tick, but it won't last the next 50 years based on that model. So that's my proposition, and to make, this is where it gets, we're talking about being hard, to transform this into something different that is more communal, where we're really much more invested in each other, is dependent on what the rest of the climate's going to do to us. Because I talked about this 13 years ago, and I got, you know, everybody was pissed off with me, challenging that. So, but that's shifting already. It's already shifted. 13 years has shifted the consciousness around the impending catastrophe or transformation or disruption that's occurring. So, I mean, it's been a battle to hang on to some of the things we set up as part of our fundamentals, like no dogs and cats. We've had people having dogs hiding in the house, and anyway, we've got one dog. Now the question, when you have a variation on a policy, was it going to ripple through the whole thing? Does that mean everybody's going to, oh, she's got a dog, can I have a dog? So that, I think it's quarantine, so I'm not particularly anxious about it, but it is. And then there's been the campaign, we've got to connect to the grid, because the grid goes nearly past my door. You know, and we're living with 30-watt solar panels and can't watch Neighbours because it's run out of power, and, you know, I mean, 50 years ago, come on, solar was pretty crap, right? Now we've gone berserk now, of course, with solar everywhere. But hanging on to being off-grid, and now we've got Glenn, where is he? He's hiding, is he? Because he now wants to propose, he's proposing, well, maybe, Peter, we can connect to the grid, but we won't take power from them, we'll just sell power to them. Oh, maybe that's a good idea. So I'm bending towards that idea, actually. So, hanging on to your principles. I mean, we're supposed to be a learning community. I think we're pretty weak at that. We're weak internally, and we run workshops and have this conference, and it's fantastic, it's great. But we're weak in terms of really coming to grips with individualism and community. And it's not about, I don't agree with someone who's talking about balance between individualism and community. I don't think it's about balance. It's about synergy. It's about putting them together so they both flower at the same time. That is a big aspiration. That's big. And it requires a lot of finessing, a lot of design, a lot of commitment, and I'm waiting for the circumstances to require it rather than my advocacy.
I'm struggling to think of something. I know we've done things that don't work and then we stop doing them. That's what you're talking about. Oh, well, it seems so sort of mundane almost. When we first started having, we always had a communal veggie garden. No one has their private veggie garden. I mean, people might have parsley beside their house or whatever, but everything comes from, you know, we all grow everything in the communal. And in the beginning we had a garden coordinator. This was a terrible move. It was a poor garden coordinator because people, they abducted they exported their responsibility onto the garden coordinator. And the garden coordinator was sort of beside themselves. This needs watering, you know, this needs weeding, blah, blah, blah. And the biggest fights happened in the garden, really big fights, you know, screaming and yelling fights happened in the garden. Your weeds are getting onto my road, blah. pathetic, but all fights are pathetic, really, aren't they, when you think about them? And so we decided that, and this is a good thing, I think, is that because it supports, people need autonomy as well as the community thing. So we've done a lot of things to support people have an autonomy in various, and that was one of them where there was no garden coordinator. The jobs were divided up so that I do sort of weeds along with, identifying. I don't have to get them all out, but I make sure they get out. And I do some of them, the smaller ones. And the person who does the, bed preparation, and then there's the cover crop. So we just said, I used to do carrot, for decades I did carrots. Someone's just taken it over now, because I can't bend down very much. But the person who did the crop, it was go to woe. You prepared the bed, the beds were prepared and mounded up, but you did everything you need, what particular fertiliser, the weeding, the planting, and so on. And suddenly the garden stopped having these giant fights, and it wasn't all on, there was no one to export it on. You had to go, if you had a problem, you had to go to that person. So one person made the compost, and all these jobs were dispersed, but they were autonomous in those jobs. That's a very important part of a community, is having as much autonomy as you can without intruding on the communal.
But autonomy within the framework.
Within the framework. Within the framework.
It's not autonomy outside of it.
Yeah. No, if someone said, I'm going to only eat from my own, well, they wouldn't, because who wants to grow every vegetable when these people become experts at growing a particular vegetable, and there's tons of it. And so that sort of autonomy within the framework. Thanks.
Is it like autonomy that serves the communal goal?
That serves the communal. That's right. That's a good way of putting it.
You don't want to be involved in every bloody collective decision making.
No.
So, any more questions? How are we going with questions? And then we might want to wrap this up, I think. I'm getting a bit tired. I get the energy feel.
Shane had one.
Shane?
No, it's kind of answered. I was just thinking about, we're trying to create, you guys created communities back in the 70s.
Oh, yes, easier.
And, you talk about hyper-individualism, and I think actually what Phil said is right. I think it's because we've got hyper-capitalism now.
Hyper what?
Capitalism.
Before that you said.
And hyper-individualism has come along with that, and it wasn't such a it was existing in the 70s, but now we're like an accelerated capitalism. Yeah. So it's kind of, it's like, the community life's going this way, and it's getting the polarization between living this lifestyle of community and what's happening out there is actually widening, if that makes sense. And so I'm just wondering, I guess, comments about right now, people interested in community, it's almost like a further step than in the 70s. So I don't know, just any comments you have about that?
Well, I think on the one hand it is a further step, but on the other hand the need is greater. So in a sense we've got two tensions. We've got to move into community is a bigger step because of this hyper-individualism, as you say, and I agree with that. But in other senses, the more hyper it becomes, the more obvious the need for community, because the social costs of not being in community, i.e. suicide, addiction, the list, isolation, meaninglessness, alienation. I mean, the list, and that list has always been there. It's just more of it, and therefore that extreme, together with the world of nature that's bearing down on us, I think, forces us to reach out, even though we haven't got a bloody clue how to do it. I'll put it that way. And we often don't know we need it, and we invest in other things, addiction and whatever, as a pill for it, for the hollow feeling, and it's so that's and therefore it makes it bloody harder to create community, and you've got to be really tough in confronting the gap between the aspiration for it and the need. And this is what you're going to talk about tomorrow, I presume, need. So I'll hand back to you.
I just think all over, the 70s was a very globally affluent time. It, that was money around, and it was being, and land was cheap. Councils weren't so hideous. It was a lot. There was a lot of things that if you're trying to start it now, which you're doing, you have to deal with, and especially the councils. Like, they make it really difficult. And building materials, everything's more expensive. Trying to survive financially is harder.
But I think
everything. But yes,
go on.
But I'm
it's
not
more about the mindset. I think it's even more individual now than the 70s.
Oh, absolutely. In the 70s, we didn't have. It wasn't even a thing. It was like, we're all naked, hugging everything.
There was a naive utopian, positive. The decade 70s was very innovative. You think about it. I mean, the women's movement, the environment movement, anti-war movement. So there was a lot of creative, positive thinking about the future. Whereas now we're coming out of a much more, instead of the glass being over half full, in terms of the aspiration, it's half empty, and and therefore the question of how much of a therapeutic community do we need to be in order to be able to actually create one and survive. And I think, in a sense, therapeutic communities that are effective are very communal and very confronting and very powerful. Something like More and More can only handle a couple of nuts cases, and that's about it. I mean, in other words, we're not set up to be a therapeutic community, though we are always, in some senses, being therapeutic, in some senses, but to actually explicitly put that on the agenda, and we talked a bit about this morning, but I think that's tough. That's tough stuff. And when you really are damaged, it's very difficult to heal and be healed. And that begins with not being a victim.
No.
Oh, no, sorry.
We have to make a distinction.
No,
we're all victims of a terrible
sorry,
system.
I take that back. Good on you.
We're all victims of that, but we're not going to play victim to it. It's a really big distinction.
Good correction.
It is really important.
I agree.
I mean,
I've
drunken the Kool-Aid of community, of course, but I'm just wondering, how do we get others to, in this hyper-individualism of it's getting harder, if that makes sense, for that Kool-Aid to be, as you said, attractive and flavoursome, and people going, oh, actually, now that I've tasted it, it's amazing. It seems, what I'm seeing is because there's a desperation in the world, that there's kind of like, oh no, I can't put all my eggs in this basket because, and it's like, I see a lot of nervous energy of people entering the community space.
Yeah, we like to have options.
Yeah.
Opt out. I want a plan B. I want a plan C.
Yeah.
All that. But I think that's part of the mobility of our culture. To be so, you can't. Well, if you've always got a plan B, plan C, and all that stuff, you're mobile. You're not committed. And if you're not committed, you're not really opening to the journey. Now, and therefore you're missing out on the benefits. But how do we get that? I actually think, I take the COVID example. We had a lot of people coming to visit Mura Mura. And then after COVID, we still get usually half a dozen or whatever if you're lucky. But there was a bit of a flood and it didn't last. But the flood that's coming of one sort or another is going to last.
Well, yeah, we know at the end of capitalism ends, it equals. Yeah.
Well, look, the thing is, no one knows what's going to happen. And you have, in a very volatile, broken down, ecologically situation where you can't, it's very hard to predict it. Even the bomb with their billions of dollars of equipment cannot now predict. And because we live in I live in a very big weather, latitude, and they can't predict it anymore. And it's the same with everything else. Very hard to predict. So you have to think. There's a book by, I can't think of his name. It's the best book I've read on, going forward in what's happening, called At Work in the Ruins. Who wrote that? What? Dugald Hine. He doesn't give any answers, but he gives a name for what we're doing. That's what I just thought, oh, that's what I've been doing for 50 years. At work in the ruins. And I don't know how these ruins are going to turn out, because 50 years ago the writing was well on the wall. And that was part of the thought about coming to growing food especially, is that we have to, okay, I'm at work in the ruins. What am I seeing around me? What's a good decision? That level is where we have to operate at, and I think that it will slowly change because the ruins are getting bigger, and that people will realise that it's safer with a tribe than it is with people who will kick you, who won't help you. It's safer with that, although people really help you in the city. I'm in the city, yeah, I've just been in the city. They're all helping me, like as though I'm 105. They're helping me. It's incredible. It's beautiful. Actually, just down there in Bridge Road, they're helping me. I'm just so touched. I don't know what to say, Shane. I just think it will happen because of what's happening. Yeah. I think it will happen.
It's safer in a tribe, but what we've got to learn is about it's also the vehicle for thriving, about your becoming and flowering. Yeah. And it's not nothing particularly new about community. It's as ancient as our existence as a human being. It's just a matter of reactivating those skills. Anyway, I think the energy's... any more busting energy? Questions? Any more? One more?
One more?
Yeah. One more.
From your experience, do you reckon that people...
Hang on.
From your experience...
Two more, that's it. It's just typical. You leave it to the last minute and then you want to ask a question.
No, look at your energy.
Yeah, we've reactivated it a bit. Okay, all right. Well, you lift up. Come on. If you want to continue, let's have some energy.
I'm just wondering, from your experience in the... do you find that the people that... Do you reckon, from your experience, the people that are getting attracted to community nowadays are a lot more conservative and there's a lot less idealism? I've also just noticed in my experience in intentional community the last 20 years that we've sort of fallen into this trap that, the shorter the meeting is, the better, and yet there's the flip side to that is that the stuff that surfaced in meetings 20 years ago wouldn't happen nowadays, I think, and we've got a really slow turnover, so we know each other really well. But yeah, I'm just intrigued with, it sort of goes on from Shane's question, I think, of just, have you noticed that with the change over the last 50 years?
Well, I'll speak personally. I like a meeting that's well managed, well run, well facilitated, and so forth, and deals with what's on the agenda. So, I've been going 50 years of meetings, so I don't have a great deal of tolerance for unnecessary meeting. I'll put it that way. But are we more conservative? Oh, go on.
Oh, no, go on. No, finish, please.
Whether are we? I think it's conservative and more. I just think the circumstances are what's going to drive transformation. Yeah. And I think it's that simple. So it's not about whether the people are more conservative or not. If they're trying to hang on to radical individualism and be in a community, it's not going to work. If you're going to hang on to, I'm the victim, come and look after me, that's not going to work. So we know what works. It's just a question of whether or not the group is prepared to commit to what works and pay the price of that, the pain of it sometimes, and the, copping the flack. Anyway, Carol.
I don't think our place has got more conservative. I think it's actually got more radical, given what's going on around outside. And we've had to change what we grow because of the extreme heat. You can't grow, lovely for a very long period. The heat now goes on. We don't have a spring anymore. It goes winter, summer, and so you can't grow ordinary lettuce, the lettuce that you love, until winter. So now we've got the lettuce in. But in all that other time, we are planting subtropical carbohydrates and subtropical greens, which is not everyone's favourite food, but it is what we can grow. And because we are unbelievably committed not to buying stuff that we can grow, we are getting, in this adaptation business that Clive Hamilton is saying, we have to adapt. We have to start adapting, and we are doing that in various ways. So to me, it feels more radical in that way.
I would just a postscript to what I said, I would say there's a risk of being more trivial rather than more conservative. Trivial in the sense of politeness, not dealing with stuff that's difficult. I think that's more, we have a cultural overlay, and we have it in more and more, and we have it outside, and therefore there's a politeness and all that stuff. So I think there's a risk of trivialisation and taking things as given, rather than seeing it as always an ongoing energy to bring more life, different life. How are we going to do this differently? I'm happy to change things, but put up a proposal that's better, takes us further down or more richly. Rather than, we've got a policy, but let's don't enforce it. Let's just ignore it. Which we've done, Until then the wheels fall off, and then you've got a court case, and we should do whatever. So one more question. I'm getting tired.
Thanks. I wanted to ask about Dhammananda around I'm curious roughly how much time it takes to grow the 75% of your food, and also what people do for other kinds of income and so on.
Yeah, so because it grew up in the midst of the system's fucked and I want a handout, we made it, you can't be on the dole there. And that filtered out all the because ofs. It was very simple. People say I'm tough. Yeah, I was outraged because most of the dropouts were highly educated people, privileged people. That's who the dropouts were, largely, at that time. It's not the same now, because it's very tough to survive now. We still have that thing, so everyone had to earn a living. We didn't succeed in getting some way of, having a business on the farm like a lot of communities do. We didn't do that. So we all went out to work, and there's one family now who both of them it's complicated circumstances, which we're totally supporting, but they work hard, but maybe not as many hours. So it's not so much the hours you work, it's if you've agreed to produce or look after or whatever, that it's done. And that is the evidence. It's not like hours. So, it's a different way of, because it is an evidence-based situation of food growing or maintenance of a building or whatever.
So I understand that it'd fluctuate depending on the people and their particular needs and abilities and so on. But could you give a rough estimate?
Well, so we say you sign up 2 rosters a week, which is milking, cooking, a kitchen roster, general cheese making, butter making, fire making, etc., cleaning. So that's 2 hours in any time of day. Before dinner, because you don't want to be in the kitchen if a cook's there. And Saturday morning 4 hours and Friday morning 4 hours. But if you do it some other time, that's fine. Obviously, not everyone can be there on those days, but you get the job done, like the fruit gets picked up off the ground or off the tree or the compost made or whatever. So they're rough amounts. It's at a guideline. But, you know, if you get your roster done in an hour and a half, well, good on you. You know, it's just a guideline. And the butter's made, the yogurt's made, the fire's made, the floor's swept, etc. Then that's the thing. And I mean, it would wouldn't it be awful, like how many, I couldn't bear it. I could not bear it. How many hours, like policemen. And we had a guy there who used to, when certain people walked into the room, he'd go, "Ee-oi, ee-oi." Yvonne, no, he'd go, "Yvonne, Yvonne," you know, like a siren. So obviously the policeman's coming, and yeah, he used to do that was when certain people walked in, because, yeah, and it was funny, like, you know, we just don't want that sort of scrutiny on each other. And we didn't, you know, we try and not interfere, even though we've all this framework that we run the whole place in and the agreements, we try not to interfere in people's lives. You know, we didn't say you had to be vaccinated, you know, it was just we kept the distance, we did what the government said, but we didn't ask anybody what their status was on the vaccination. It was their business. And we stopped the dinners, someone cooked, you came down with your tiffin, it was put in, someone stayed back and washed up. So we had still cooked the food, we fitted around that, and yeah, we try not to create, that would have created massive conflict, wouldn't it? So we didn't go do that, we just did what the government advised, because none of us knew anything then. So yeah, we don't, I mean, there is someone who was there for a long time who was quite a bean counter, but we just...
Okay, at that point I think we can finish. Thank you very much.